Have you ever asked yourself, is this actually religious OCD or is it possibly a demon? Yes, many people have asked this question. I want to address that today. I am in another random location as my house is still turned upside down with renovations. I keep getting this question everywhere I turn where people are really struggling with the idea that maybe this is not actually a clinical diagnosis like OCD. Maybe this is demonic activity. Maybe this is something like I'm being harassed or I'm being possessed or this is the spirit of OCD. A lot of this is coming from really well-meaning church members who are trying to cast things out of them or get them to break soul ties and these kinds of things. So I want to address that today. Those of you who don't know this channel, my name is Jamie Eckert. I share biblical content for Christians who are struggling with religious OCD and the weird stuff that comes with that. So thanks for coming along the ride as we talk about this topic. I don't think this is going to be triggering. I think this is hopefully going to be freeing and comforting for you. Let me just give you like the bare bones basic version of this. Here's how it usually works is that somebody starts having obsessive content about religious things. They start praying like crazy or studying like crazy because you're so afraid that they're not saved, and fill in the blanks for whatever the obsessive compulsive content is. They'll go to their pastor or their priest, or not typically priest. This is a lot more common in evangelical Christianity and more particularly the charismatic branches of Christianity. But they'll go to their faith leader, whoever that may be, maybe even a family member, and the idea given to them is this is a faith problem and you must be doing something wrong. So let's help you get this right. We're going to pray over you. We're going to help you get rid of the spirit of OCD. Maybe they'll call it something else. Maybe they'll call it the spirit of pride or the spirit of doubt or the spirit of faithlessness. And there will be this whole big rah-rah session for you to break those soul ties, or this different terminology that's being used that I'm not even getting it all in my head right now. But if you've been there, you know what I mean. So there's a big push for you to believe. And if you will just have faith hard enough, then the prayers will be effectual and you will be cured. I will just say, as a person who specializes in working with religious OCD, like that's all that I do. I don't really there's a whole lot of other things I could have gotten into, but this is like the really small niche that I'm working in because that's what I struggled with. I have seen hundreds and hundreds of cases, probably around 600 or more cases of scrupulosity at this point I've worked with. And many of those individuals have gone to deliverance ministries. They have gone through this whole process of being told to, get this thing cast out of you. And I will say in every single case that I've worked with, every single time this happens, they don't get better. In fact, many of them get significantly worse because now here's the logic. Follow the logic. You go to deliverance ministries to get this thing cast out of you, and it doesn't work. So the rationale is, I didn't have enough faith, or God doesn't love me enough to cast this out, or maybe God doesn't even exist, and there's all these terrible interpretations that come out of it. Or another one, like maybe I'm already lost and so God's not helping me because there's no hope. There's another option, and that other option is maybe this isn't a demon. And I think that's a freeing idea for many people. Now, I will say, I mentioned that nobody I've ever seen has ever gotten better from this, and that is true. I did recently get an email from somebody saying that her friend got better from this. And I'm open to hearing that story. I've not personally interviewed her myself or heard her story. But the bottom line is that the general trend is that people that have a legit case of clinical OCD don't get better from being told this is a demon. And that's really something that faith leaders need to recognize. I wish that religious OCD was more well known in religious communities because I think this would help so many people. We need to be careful about labeling this as a demon because I've seen people have very, very, very negative episodes after the spiral that comes from not being helped from these kinds of prayers. So I want to just remind you of a verse in 1 John 4, verse 4, that tells us that he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So it means that God's children are inhabited by Jesus, by the Spirit of God himself. And that means that the Spirit of Christ that's dwelling in me is greater than any of these other spirits that live in the world. The context of 1 John 4 is the false spirits and antichrist and false prophets that go around and whatnot. And so that context is basically saying the spirit that lives in you is greater than all those demonic spirits that would like to live in you. Notice that it doesn't say this spirit is sometimes greater except when it takes a vacation. Then on the vacation days, evil spirits might get into you. That's not what it says. It also doesn't say God's spirit in you is greater than the evil spirits when you're being a good Christian and when you feel saved. That's also not what it says. It doesn't say his spirit who lives in you is greater than the false spirits when you have 100% intellectual certainty and assurance of your salvation. Then you're going to be protected from evil spirits. That's not what it says. He who is living in you is greater than he who is in the world. That's a God who doesn't take a vacation, doesn't take a break, who is consistently with you, holding on to you, protecting you, saving you. I just love what somebody said in our group session some time ago. He didn't speak in terms of I was saved. He says, I was saved, I am being saved, and I will be saved at last. And I think that's such a good perspective to take into consideration, because the salvific work of Christ in your life was not a one-time event. There was an event that happened, and that was a very important event, but it's something that continues all throughout your life, that God is saving you. He's holding you in his hands. He's rescuing you on a moment-by-moment basis, because that's that living, breathing relationship that God has with us. And so I love that 1 John 4 uses terminology of him living in us. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And so, my friends, in this context, it's not possible for God's people to be possessed by a spirit of OCD. You can have a clinical diagnosis of something called obsessive compulsive disorder, which might make some uninformed clergy think you have a demon. And this is even truer for those who get like the physical sensation side of things, like, ooh, I felt something enter my ear, somebody said recently, or I felt something dark and depressing, or another person talked about the sleep paralysis, that she was getting sleep paralysis and seeing things in her room. I know that it's not their fault. It's not the clergy's fault for kind of getting this messed up sometimes, but I want you to just be aware that that's something that happens. This is not a demon, guys. This is not a demon. This is a mental health disorder. We need to treat it like that. Don't try to pray away something that is a physiological disorder. You wouldn't try to pray away a heart attack. I mean, obviously we would pray, but we would also go to the emergency room, you know? Yeah, we need to get the definition correct in order to get the cure correct. And the definition here is that we're dealing with an issue in our brain that 100% has spiritual roots and implications. Like, obviously what you believe about God is going to impact your OCD, and the way that you think God is expecting you to fulfill various different spiritual disciplines is going to impact your compulsive behavior. There's a lot of overlap, but the core cause of this disease is not a demonic one. And so I think that can really help us. I hope it helps somebody as I put out this little video. So keep hanging in there. Let's get the definition correct so that the cure can be correct as well. Yes, be encouraged, and I'll see you back in one of my next videos.